Hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel. We have a brand new host here today, and it's me. It's Luke. Now, I obviously look a little bit different with a shaved head and missing the bulk of my beard. But in today's video, we're going to be doing a Q&A session, going through some burning questions you might have around the Australian property market. Now, to kick off, let me describe what's been going on with me. So yes, I've shaved my head. Yes, the beard is disappearing. I'm more than okay. I'm doing very well. I just got a condition or an autoimmune disease called alopecia areata. And what that means is if I've got significant hair loss and body hair loss as well, and I'm going to be starting a new drug trial, and it helps you regrow the hair that you've lost because the immune system is suppressing the hair growth. So all in all, I'm doing very well. Don't be concerned for my health. And yeah, just excited to start this drug trial soon to see if I can regrow my hair quickly. But enough about me. Let's dive into some burning questions about the Australian property market. So the first big question on today's list is, are Australian interest rates going to be cut? And when will that happen? I mean, that is the big question here. Over the last 18 months, the RBA has done about 13 rate rises. And I've heard in the news and the media that that is like fast and furious in terms of 13 rate rises happening in a very short period of time. Let's hope we don't get another sequel with a 14th rate rise happening in 2024, but it's very well possible. We've just gone through the Black Friday sales. We're just in Cyber Monday at this point in time, and we're going to have a big Boxing Day sale and Christmas as well. So given all the activity happening in Australia's economy, we may not see inflation come down as much as the RBA wants it to, which means I think that the rate cuts might be later in 2024 rather than earlier in 2024, and even potentially in early 2025. Now, that is purely speculation, and the most important thing is don't focus so much on the interest rates, focus on what you can do in your own property portfolio. I even had a chat this week with a friend, and I told them, have you called your bank in the last few years? And she said, no, we're around a 7% interest rate. And after chatting with her, she gave her bank a call and she was able to knock off almost a full percent on her interest rate. So from around 7.2 to 6.2 in dropping her interest rate. So if you haven't given your bank a call recently, make sure you call them up, keep them honest, and get your interest rates as low as possible. Other than that, we might need to look at the bigger picture in terms of your investment philosophy to allow yourself to keep going and to keep building a property portfolio. Now, this leads me into the next question, which is, Luke, how do you see people and young Australians being able to break into the property market given we're in this higher interest rate environment? Now, the key thing is we're not in such a bad position. A 6 or 7% interest rate is not 12 or 15%. And these interest rates are very close to the long-term averages of around that 5 to 6% mark. So I think the best way for Australians, especially young Australians, to break into the market is to reduce costs and build up savings as fast as possible. The other big thing that is obviously going to impact your serviceability is increasing your day job income, even if it's only for a short period of time. So if you need to job hop every 2 to 3 years to get yourself bigger pay rises, then it could absolutely be worth it if you're able to get access to more serviceability and break into the property market. Most people struggle to break in, but once you've got your foot in the door and you've got your foot on the property ladder, that's when you can get those stepping stones to the next investment or the next property. And so if you're buying your first home, be realistic, look at the budget you have available, and look to add value if you want to fast track your journey. The next big question is, what are some of the best places to invest here in Australia? I get asked this a lot. Obviously, I'm a Brisbane-based buyer's agent, so I'm very bullish on the Southeast Queensland market, so you need to take that bias into your account. But generally, as I look at Australia, I still like the minor capital cities, so the Perths, the Brisbanes. Adelaide's a little bit hot for me now, in my own opinion, and I think Sydney and Melbourne I wouldn't be buying unless I was a local and I really understood the on-the-ground market. I think they're a little overpriced and you'd get a lot more value in a major regional town, like Emily and I have bought in Coffs Harbour, or like I said, I'm very bullish on Brisbane because we've got the Olympic Games in 2032. We've got the population growth. We've got the jobs. There's so many things going for the Brisbane market. So obviously I would talk about Greater Brisbane and the benefits of buying in Southeast Queensland. So it's up to you. It's based on your finances and it's based on your strategy. So you need to make sure you have the finances in order to buy in that location. For example, a lot of people are priced out of Sydney and Melbourne, and that's why they're looking elsewhere. And then in terms of your strategy, you need to make sure that you're happy with the long-term growth potential, as well as the current and future cash flow on that property play. So we've been talking about first-home buyers breaking into the market and where do I need to buy? But let's give a real number to it. How much money do I need to start investing? In my opinion, I think about $50K. is where I see the starting point for most investors to break into the property market. In that case, you might be able to use a 5% deposit scheme. So say you're buying a $500,000 property, you're able to put around 25 to 30K down, and you may be able to be exempt from stamp duty in that case. You then got other closing costs like lawyers, if you use a buyer's agent, building and pest inspectors, accountants. The list goes on, so you need to buffer for those things. And I also think it's very wise to have a small buffer in place as well. So 5 to 10K of an emergency buffer. So given all those numbers and factors with a deposit of around 25K, say another 5 to 15K in closing costs, plus an emergency buffer, that's why I think you need around $50,000 to break into the Australian property market. You could potentially do it with less if you're looking to just buy an apartment, but for my money, I want to buy where there's land value. I want to buy where there's scarcity and long-term growth potential. So take that into account when you're looking at potential deals. So the next big question is around finances and structuring. Now, this is a big topic and can go on for quite some time, but let's stick to the basics. Most Australians are either going to buy in their personal name, in a company and trust structure, or in their super fund. Those are the three most common forms. And most people will start off buying in their personal name and then expand to a company and trust structure and then expand to a super fund if they want to continue investing in property. Now, the way I like to think about it is when you're dealing with the brokers and banks, you generally want to max out your personal borrowing capacity and then move to trust and company structures. The reason is it's far more simple to get lending in your personal name. Unless you're in a very litigious industry or a job where you don't want to buy in personal names, this would generally be suitable for most people. But of course, have a chat with your accountant, have a chat with your lawyer about what's right for you. But for most people, buying in your personal name is going to be the best way to break into the market. And then in locations like Western Australia and Queensland, it can be very advantageous to use a trust structure because they have higher land tax thresholds. And therefore, you could buy multiple properties in Queensland and multiple properties in WA, using the power of trust structures to boost your borrowing capacity if they have positive cash flow, as well as using those structures to minimize your land tax because each structure generally has its own land tax threshold. Now, this is not as efficient in other states like New South Wales and Victoria, where the trust structures are being far more penalized in terms of land tax. And as far as I'm aware, Victoria is lowering its land tax threshold to just $50,000 of land value. So essentially all structures are going to be land taxed in that state. So in my own approach, again, we started with personal names first, and then are moving to more company and trust structures as we continue to build out our property portfolio. So work out what's right for you. When it comes to super, that is a whole different kettle of fish. So have a chat with an accountant about whether you want to buy in your super. Now, this is a great question. Can you buy positive cash flow properties anymore? The quick answer is even a property in the CBDs or in the major regional towns, you're unlikely to find positive cash flow for a basic bread and butter property. Even if you buy a renovator and add value to it and increase the equity and increase the rental yield, you're still unlikely to have positive cash flow. The reason is when people run these scenarios and run these situations, most people are calculating a 20% deposit. And I've seen some people even use 100% debt to try and find positive cash flow in those circumstances. And that's just very unlikely for residential real estate here in Australia. Maybe with some commercial properties, you'd be able to get neutral to positive at this point in time. And given interest rates at this point in time for most Australians are sitting around that 6.2 to 7.2% interest rate, then given the yields on standard residential property here in Brisbane is generally 4.5% to 5% for a lot of our buyers, or even in the worst case scenario when you're buying blue chip around 3.5% to 4% gross yields, if you're paying an interest rate of 6.5%, just the interest alone is probably going to be larger than the rental income. So what you need to factor in is the growth of the property in 2024. So if you're willing to accept minus $10,000 a year in cash flow, is the property going to grow more than $10,000 in value in the next 12 months and over the next 2 years and over the next 20 years? You should be looking at the long-term horizon and the long-term trajectory of your property portfolio. So Emily and I do have some negatively geared properties in our portfolio. And if you've seen in other videos on our channel, there was a video recently where we broke down our $200,000 plus gross income and broke down a lot of the expenses there as well. So if you want to see that, make sure you click it in the card over here. I can think of the Baby Queenslander, for example, which is a little 2-bedroom home on 600 square meters, which only rents for about $480 per week and is worth over $800,000. So in that scenario, it is negatively geared, but it is growing and it's got good growth potential. So it's a matter of weighing it up and when you want to recycle that capital and sell a property, or whether you want to continue to sit on that property, even though it might be losing you a little bit of cash flow for the future growth potential. This leads me into the next question, which is if you can't get positive cash flow, how can you build a property portfolio? Now, this comes down to a personal situation. Everyone's situation is going to be different. If you're buying as a couple, like Emily and I had been and continue to be as we grow our property portfolio together, then you have more advantages than if you're buying as a single person. So look at your own situation. If you've got double borrowing power and you don't have kids at this point in time and you're able to boost your day job income and reduce your expenses, you're going to put yourself in a fantastic position. I think the thing is to look at your own situation and optimize. You can't look at someone else or look at myself and go, I want to be in your shoes, because you might not have the earning potential. You might not be able to save as well as we can save, but you should be able to look at your own situation and be realistic about what you can change and optimize in your own circumstances. So let's look at a person that's got no property, they're not in the market. This individual might earn about $80,000 per year and they're spending about $55,000 a year and are saving about $10K a year, with the remaining amount of funds going to tax. So $55K expenses, $10K of savings, $15K to tax, and a gross income of $80,000. Now for this person, can they minimize their expenses? Can they move back home? Can they get into a share house? Can you create more space for saving? That'll help them boost the deposit and get their foot into the property market. And then once you're looking at the property market, can you buy in a growth location or an area primed for capital growth? Can you also look at manufactured cash flow deals if you want to fast track your journey? It's really up to you as the individual to look at optimizing your scenario. So try and create more savings, boost your income for serviceability, look for manufactured value, look for capital growth. There's a little bit to think about, but if you can optimize in each of these areas, that's how you can get a much more significant outcome. Now, the last question on today's Q&A is around getting stuck. I'm hearing a lot of people getting stuck. There's a lot of people running out of serviceability, not knowing what to do with their property portfolio. And it again comes back to that last question around optimizing. You need to optimize and look at your situation. You may well be stuck. That might be the truth. You might have used up your borrowing capacity with the big four banks. You might have then looked at the second and third tier lenders and exhausted that as well. And you might be tapped out in your day job and not be able to increase your day job income. So in that scenario, you need to look at your property portfolio. Say you have 2 or 3 homes in your property portfolio, so your own home and 2 other assets. And then you need to get real with evaluating each of those assets for their merit. So say you look at your own home and you're willing to become a rent investor. Maybe you can clear a bunch of dad debt. A bunch of dad's debt. It's your own debt. Maybe you can clear a bunch of bad debt on your own home and use that serviceability to buy 2 more investments and become a rent investor. That may be the sacrifice you're willing to make to boost your property portfolio and hold a larger asset base. For other people, you might look at the 3 properties in your portfolio and go, that's enough. I've got my own home. I've got 2 other investments, both of which I can build granny flats on and boost my income and earn over $100,000 in retirement. And so you might have already hit your goal, and now it's just a matter of doing those builds for the granny flats and saving towards your future. So you need to look at your end goals and how you can work backwards from that situation. I just always come back to my case of Emily and I, and when we've got stuck throughout our journey, we just didn't take no for an answer. I clearly remember calling up CBA when we were ready to buy a unit block, and I said to the manager, yep, we'd like another $2 million, thanks. And the manager came back to me and said, Luke, CBA won't give you any more than $800K. That's it, no more money. And so from my point of view, I went, oh, fine. I won't take no for an answer. I'll reach out to another bunch of banks and brokers and see if I can get more borrowing capacity. And Pepper Money was willing to lend us at that point in time $2 million for our next purchase. So we used that borrowing capacity when we had it. And everyone's borrowing capacity is going to change throughout their life. You're going to have periods where you've got a lot more income in your day job and periods where you have kids and more expenses. And you might have taken a European trip recently, which cost you $30,000 and cut right into your savings. That could be well worth it to you. It's just a matter of weighing these things up, working out whether you can chat with other banks and other brokers to boost your borrowing capacity, and then taking action based on those next steps. I see a lot of people getting stuck. A lot of people who are fearful, but the biggest thing for me is looking at each area, how you can optimize it, how you can take the next step forward, and that's the way you can continue to grow in your property portfolio and your journey. So if you're interested in sitting down with myself and having a chat about your strategy, both short and long term, and you're also interested in buying a property here in the Greater Brisbane market in the next 6 months, then head over to purposeproperty.com.au to book in a free strategy session with myself. There's currently limited availability, but we'll be opening up new sessions in January 2024. So I'll be excited to be chatting with you in the new year. Otherwise, thanks for sticking around to the end of this video. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.